We're here this afternoon to discuss the hurdles created by our challenging economic environment and to examine how arts and humanities funders have responded and evolved into this new reality. This forum is designed to address organizational funding and will convene another panel this spring to address the needs of individual artists, which are often quite different than those from organizations. In an effort to strengthen and broaden support for the arts and the humanities sector, it's our objective for the panelists to shed light on the trends that both private and public funders are currently witnessing and implementing. While we're fortunate in Montgomery County to have strong support for public funding in the cultural community, we'd be remiss if we didn't take steps towards greater accountability, ensuring that we maintain the public trust, encourage sustainability, and help all of our organizations thrive and flourish even in the most difficult of times. It's my sincerest hope that our panelists are able to provide insights to all of you that enable you to build better cases for support and compete more effectively for all available funds. And with that said, I'd like to say that as a footnote, should you have specific questions about funding for your organization or project, we ask that you not use this forum today to discuss these with our panelists, but to use the time to exchange your business card and set an appropriate time to discuss your project or initiative at a later date. So without further ado, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce our moderator, Amanda Farnham, Grants Manager from the J. Willard and Alice S. Marriott Foundation. Amanda's work in philanthropy and as a community leader in Montgomery County made her the perfect candidate to lead the discussion today and to guide us as we discuss some very, very difficult and challenging issues. I'd like to ask you all that we're very grateful also to Montgomery Community Media, who is taping our presentation today, so that for those who were unable to attend, they're able to see it once we're able to edit it and put it onto our website. So with that, I'd ask you to please silence your phones and your pagers. Take this moment to do so. And again, thank you very much all for coming, and especially to our wonderful panelists. Amanda?
All right. Well, thank you, Susan, for the very lovely introduction. Hopefully this panel will live up to the expectations. So first, I just want to briefly introduce our panelists that we have here today, which I think are far greater experts in this area than myself, and I'm really honored to be joined by them. So first, we'll start with Michael Chlorin. Michael serves as the director for the local arts agencies and Challenge America Fast Track at the National Endowment for the Arts. Most recently, he served as director of Seattle's Office of Arts and Cultural Affairs, where he led the city's department funding and public art programs, developed policy initiatives, and brought arts education back to Seattle Public Schools. Next to him, we have Theresa Colvin. Theresa is the executive director of the Maryland State Arts Council, where she was appointed in 2012. She joined them as the program director for community arts development and music, having worked previously as the deputy director for the Howard County Arts Council in Ellicott City. She's active on numerous boards and committees, including the Mid-Atlantic Arts Foundation and the Maryland Cultural Data Project. Seated next to Theresa is Lionel Thomas. Lionel returned to District of Columbia government in 2011 after serving as the executive director at the Prince George's Arts and Humanities Council for 2.5 years. He was previously with the D.C. Commission on the Arts and Humanities for over 22 years, where he served in numerous capacities. Lionel earned a Master's degree of Arts in Organizational Leadership from Lewis University and a Bachelor of Arts degree in Communications from the University of Pittsburgh. He also serves on several boards in the area. And then, last but certainly not least, we have Michael Bigley. Michael is the Program Officer for the Arts and Humanities with the Morris and Gwendolyn K. Fritz Foundation. Michael, prior to working at the foundation, he was the head of education with Washington Performing Arts Society and was the founding chair of Emerging Arts Leaders. He's also very active in the community, and among other things is the chair for the Arts and Humanities Working Group for the Washington Regional Association of Grantmakers, and a committee member for the Washington Post Award of Excellence. So I think we have some very knowledgeable panelists here today that hopefully we can all take something home from and learn something from. So I think we'll dive right in. I think a lot of folks attending today were very intrigued by the title of this conversation, The New Normal. So I think it might be helpful if each of us, each of our panelists, could give us their interpretation or definition of this new normal in arts funding. So we'll start with Michael K. down on the end.
Okay. So the new normal is things are not normal and constant change. I think if you look at the world, you look at the way the music industry has been turned upside down and on its head, the way the publishing has been turned upside down on its head. I mean, there's nothing but change. And my perspective, both from the National Endowment for the Arts, but also in my former job in the city of Seattle, and also serving in a national capacity with local arts agencies around the nation. I mean, I think part of the changes, at least, and my perspective is public sector local funding, and even still at the endowment, is higher accountability. So at the Arts Endowment, we now, our funding is based on outcomes. There are 4 outcomes that are selected, and I think there's increasing, in order to be successful as a local arts agency, you have to have a degree of accountability. And I think that means, what that means for arts organizations is that I don't think arts organizations can no longer work in isolation. They have to be part of the community. I don't think that's such a bad thing, and I think the innovations, the trends that we're incorporating in terms of our own guidelines, with an emphasis on innovation, with an emphasis on service to underserved audiences, and a desire that all programs be inclusive and representative of their community, I think are actually opportunities for arts organizations. Having said that, I know that it's easier, change is easier when you're the one making the change rather than being at the other side. And I think even in the creative sector, I think any time someone mentions the word change, it can strike fear in the hearts, because we want things to be the same and we want constant. But in fact, it's a very dynamic environment, and I think being flexible and trying to understand the rationale behind those changes is really important.
Great. Theresa?
Hi, can everybody hear me? Mm-hmm. Good. I too want to echo what Michael has already said. We had our strategic planning retreat with our council just last week, and I mentioned that I'd be coming to a panel on the new normal. And our consultant said, well, as soon as you figure it out, why don't you come back and let us all know? And he said it probably would change by the time you got here anyway. So I think that's the constant. Change is the constant. As far as the Maryland State Arts Council and the new normal for state arts agencies, I'd like to share the ways in which we are similar to other state arts agencies, but also let you know that we are also quite dissimilar. And that has to do with the level of funding that we've been able to achieve in our state. Many of you know, if you are grantees of the Maryland State Arts Council, that for the last decade at least, that the Arts Council has ranked in the top 5 in per capita spending for the arts. And we've been able to maintain that ranking even through the economic downturn. Though we have taken about a 20% reduction in funds, for the last 4 budget cycles, the Governor and the General Assembly, because of their enlightened leadership, I like to say, they have really level funded the Maryland State Arts Council at $13.2 million, which has helped us maintain our general operating support for many of your organizations and other core programs. Having said that, where we also, the dissimilar part is, as you know, many state arts agencies are not in that position and have not had the benefit of that type of enlightened leadership and had suffered greatly through this economic downturn. So in that way, we are not like other states, and I think that many look to Maryland as a leader in that regard. Where we are similar is that through this downturn, what we have really focused on is accountability, as Michael said, but also relevance. We looked very hard at what programs and what role the Maryland State Arts Council should play in the arts ecology of our state, and where can we make the most difference and have the most impact. So that did lead us to make significant changes in some of the program areas that we had been running. Just like you, the new normal means less staff, reduced staff. We too had to deal with expense cuts, travel restrictions, furloughs, hiring freezes, staff reductions. So we have really focused on those things that are most relevant and those things that make us accountable to the public of Maryland. And we've done that primarily by focusing also on data collection and reliable data collection and being able to report that out in a meaningful way. And we've done that through our economic impact that we do on an annual basis. After all, we are in the Department of Business and Economic Development, so jobs and tax revenues are very important and are things that we need to be accountable for. They also tie into what the goals of the administration are with a capital A, which has also helped us maintain our relevance. So all of those things I say to you are things that you should be looking at and making your case for your organization for funding, especially when it comes to public funding. How are you serving the citizens of our state?
Good afternoon. I'm Lionel Thomas with the D.C. Commission on the Arts and Humanities, and I think we are in a unique situation in Washington, D.C., soon to become the new Columbia, the new state. And we have advocated for that for a very long time. And I think we are in a unique situation because we are experiencing economic, not downturn, but economic prosperity, unlike anywhere else in the country. As a matter of fact, our recent figures show that we have a surplus of $419 million at the end of the year. Which goes into what we call the rainy day fund of $1.5 billion. We are the envy of the United States at this point. I think the new normal for us and for the arts community is about relevance, and I ditto the comments of my colleagues, is making ourselves relevant to the themes and priorities of the District of Columbia. In our city, there are some overriding things that are preached throughout the government: quality of life, economic development, job creation, and education. And if you're not relevant to those themes within the District of Columbia, you're not relevant to the funding paradigm. And we have adjusted our program as such. One of the other things that we've been able to do is to increase our investment in technology, how we communicate, how we submit applications, how we submit applications, receive applications from the field is another point of interest that we have really invested in. As a matter of fact, in this coming year, we'll be investing in a new technology system to receive applications. We've heard the field, we understand the challenges, and we are investing in a new technology system to receive applications. The other part of this discussion, and I think the new normal, and artists have always been asked to do a lot with very little. I think the new normal is doing even more with less, and certainly with partnerships and collaborations, which are the overriding themes in what we see in the community, is being able to network and create opportunities where artists can connect with one another, both from the organizational standpoint and the individual standpoint. I think it's important to encourage those kinds of networking opportunities. And last but not least, there is a certain accountability both from the funder and the fundee. The funder, I think we have a major responsibility to be accountable to the people we serve as a public funder. I'll use an example. Recently, we established an arts stabilization grant. And we in order to create that program, we did a series of community forums around obtaining feedback and input about that program. It was one of the first times in my 25-year history of working in the arts in the District of Columbia and surrounding area that has occurred. What we heard and what helped inform the process was the feedback that we received from the folks from the field, understanding what their view of sustainability and long-term development was. We fall within the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development, and we're looked at in a lot of ways by that. And I've seen a number of trends over the years that have happened. And the relevance for us is why we keep doing these economic impact studies that are regional. And it's because we have to demonstrate tangible results with economic numbers. And I think my colleagues touched on that. And those are the kinds of things that are the new normal for us.
Great. Michael?
Well, I'm not going to echo what my colleagues have said, because I don't feel the need to repeat a lot of that, but it's in addition to what they've said, from a private foundation standpoint, the new normal is more competition for less dollars. There's less private funders out there supporting the arts, unfortunately. Whether those foundations have dwindled completely or have decreased by a certain percentage, there are probably, if this panel was happening 5-10 years ago, there could be maybe 5 or so more usual suspects that could be invited to this panel. So that's unfortunate that amount has decreased. So with increased competition, I think arts organizations, humanities organizations are really trying to figure out how to stay relevant and how to connect into other topic areas, other issue areas. The K-Fritz Foundation funds across the board: health, education, youth and family services, homelessness, the list goes on and on. So we'll see proposals that branch 2 or more of those areas, and organizations trying to figure out how do they stay relevant to the community needs, not just within the arts, but within the social sector. So we're seeing more of that, more collaborations, more opportunities for impact. And for K-Fritz, we're still giving general support, and we feel that that is our hallmark, and that is really important, especially in this time of need, that to provide that flexible support, to keep the lights on, to pay salaries, not to stipulate a certain program. That's really important for us. And as money becomes a little bit more difficult to find, the less hoops to jump through, we believe, the better that is.
So I think it's interesting that in the same sentence, collaboration is a good thing and a bad thing. I think it's interesting that it can, from the organization's perspective, be a bad thing because there's fewer dollars, there's fewer folks in this business of making grants in the arts, but also it sounds like it could be a good thing in that it's encouraging collaboration and getting folks to think differently. Do you all agree? And do you think that there's sort of this unintended consequence, a positive consequence of some of this competition now for these funds? Michael?
Well, it is a competitive environment, and certainly in our agency, our funding programs run anywhere from 38% with Challenge America Fast Track to 50 or maybe 60%. So it is a very, very competitive environment. But in terms of collaboration, again, I'm from Seattle, that place way out there in almost its own little universe. And I remember, Seattle's cultural development, Gregory Falls in the 60s, he said theaters are like grapes. They grow best in bunches. And I think it's that attitude that it wasn't theaters in competition with one another, but that the more, it's the Starbucks principle. I mean, the more Starbucks, the more independent coffee shops, because you're developing a taste for coffee. I remember when the recession really hit, a new artistic director came to the Pacific Northwest Ballet, Peter Bull, and he re-envisioned his role in the community, which was that dance, his goal was to cultivate more dance. And it didn't matter if it was a small individual choreographer, contemporary dance company, everyone was welcome. And he showed up at community-wide, and I think he really helped to foster the sense that increasing dance audience was good for everybody across the board, and it was ultimately good for his organization. And so I think that collaborative spirit, I think, is something that arts organizations are particularly well suited to do. And I know that in our funding environment, although technically we no longer accept consortia applications, we've seen several collaborative projects come in, and they tend to score higher because collaboration is difficult. We know that, but if you can pull it off, and I think people freak out and think, oh my God, it's mergers. Dayton, you're probably familiar with the model where they actually the Philharmonic, the opera, and the ballet collaborated under one roof, and they certainly found some efficiencies. That doesn't work across the board, but I think that sense of getting out of the scarcity mentality and sort of recognizing that, okay, we're all basically in the same business. How can we build not just audiences, but strengthen our community through our work? I think is a hallmark of communities that I've seen nationwide that can actually do that can get out of their silos. And you're seeing it with music organizations that are getting out into the community and really, as mentioned, it goes back to relevance. They're an important part of our neighborhoods and our communities, and that's another shift that I think that is the trend line.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I'm sorry.
I think we have to think outside the box, because right now in this auditorium, we're talking about the arts, and we're probably preaching to the choir. But thinking outside the box and making ourselves relevant also means that we have to get to other sectors and make ourselves relevant in other sectors. You know, I've seen some partnership applications come in that have married sports and the arts. I've seen them marry the economic department of the District of Columbia with the arts. I've seen social service organizations partner with arts organizations. So the collaboration, I think, the term collaboration needs to be broadened, and we need to start thinking outside the box to really make ourselves relevant and to really touch some of the outcomes that we're trying to seek.
And I just wanted to echo in terms of collaboration and how important it is for the arts to connect to other sectors like the business community, like the other retailers. When you think about main streets and cultural districts, we're here in Roundhouse, we're here in an arts and entertainment district, and what Silver Spring has done in terms of collaboration. This is happening across the state of Maryland and 20 other designated districts, where we have the arts actually at the table to talk about how do you revitalize downtown. We're all in this together. How do we raise this community up?
Great. Anything to add? So it sounds like obviously collaboration is in this very competitive time a good thing, and it's something that you're looking for in proposals. Are there other things or examples of proposals where beyond collaboration, an organization can kind of can help them boost their edge in this very competitive process? What other things can they do, or would you recommend they do beyond trying to collaborate with other organizations, either within or outside the arts?
I'm always a big advocate for transparency, especially in the past 5 years. The economy hasn't been so great, and everyone has had their own difficulties within their organizations. And I always recommend put everything out there in the proposal. Don't hide anything. I'm working on the proposal for 4 months. And
you'll find it.
I will find it. Not that I'm looking for errors or anything like that, but I always think it's good to be upfront. It's good to clarify if there are red flags, point them out, but also give an action plan for how you're going to address those flags, those issues. Because if a funder that might not spend as much time as I do on a proposal gets that, they might see those red flags and say, I can't deal with this, and there's too many concerns, and they will put that to the no pile. So try to leave little margin for error there. So that the transparency is a big question for me, and just making sure people are being as upfront as possible so that it makes my job easier, you put everything there up front, and we're all happy.
The other part of this discussion, I think what I would encourage you to do is to stay true to your mission, and certainly to thy own self be true, because I can't tell you how many applications that have been read by panels that they can see right through the application. The other thing is that, data collection, the more you can prove your case in the data that you collect, the kinds of people you're serving, the number of people you're serving, and the economic impact that you may be making to the community are very good in this funding environment, especially from a public funding perspective, because the stakeholders are looking on return on investment. They are looking to see what is the impact of every dollar on the community and how those dollars affect the arts, not just the arts community, but the residents and the visitors, in our case, tourists that come to Washington, D.C.
I would say say some of the strongest applications, the ones that resonate the most, are those that tell the best story. And it's your story. It's one that you want to tell us about yourself, put your best foot forward, and that there's a through line between your narrative, your budget, your mission statement, and that you get a sense of who this organization is, and mostly the people that are, the key personnel that are behind it. I think you should always look to what you want to say rather than what you think the funder wants to hear. And we judge you, our panels judge you, they are peer review panels, and they judge you based on what you say your mission is, not what we think it is or what they think it should be, and how you explain and describe the community that you want to serve. We don't expect that every organization will want to serve the entirety of the state. Define who your community is and then talk about how you go about addressing their needs. You can't be all things to all people, and we don't want you to be.
I would say authenticity, and it's been echoed here, but and Lionel said it well. But I think, and again, we use peer panelists from around the country, and there are it's a peer process, and so there are detectors that are built in. And I've had people say, oh, I need a grant writer, or I need to get the buzzwords or whatever. No. If anything, it's the English language. It's being clear. It's also not, because we're project-based, it's being very focused, not trying to do too many things, being realistic about expectations, both in terms of reach, being honest. I'll echo the honesty. I learned a long time ago how important it is. I can tell you a story about going to a funder when I was on your side of the equation, and being very honest and telling them that we couldn't do the project. And by being honest, I was actually received funding to pay off other debts. And it really taught me how important it is to be honest in our environment about the situation. I can't stress that enough. But I think it goes back to the branding of your organization. And I'm not talking about marketing. I'm talking about projects. I'm talking about our criteria, artistic excellence and merit, work samples that reflect the excellence of the artists that you're proposing, that you're putting on stage. And I'll just, the things that drive me crazy, we'll get to that.
Go ahead.
You know, math, I don't know what it is about arts people and math phobia, but really, math is simply another form of narrative. If your organization values artists, that should be reflected in the artist fees in the project budget. So I think, I don't think this is rocket science, but I think it's just clarity, and I think it's always a good idea to have someone not from the arts, knows nothing about your organization, read it. And if they can understand what in the world you're trying to say, then chances are you're on the right track.
Yeah, I had a proposal the other day where I had to use Webster's.com at least 3 times, and you can tell they were just going to the thesaurus to try to find big, impressive words, and it just made me mad. So that's one of my pet peeves, I think, or not using local data, using national data for something that's a local project. We heard Michael's. Does anyone else have anything to add to that list of what not to do?
Please be simple and concise. It's kind of like, I'm asking for funds to do something.
XYZ.
Yeah, XYZ. It's not, I've been in the arts forever, and I love the arts, and we know that you love the arts. And, you know, before we get to the last paragraph is what explains what you are requesting funding to do. It's really a pet peeve of mine, is that I ask artists to be right up front and clear. I'm requesting funds to do X, Y, and Z, and then go from there and build your case.
Well, to that point, if there are a lot of groups that apply to the foundation that have numerous programs within their organizational portfolio, and I'll often read those and be thinking, I don't know what you're doing. You're doing a lot, but you don't know what you're doing. So it gets so watered down, and the waters get muddied with all of the different things that you're doing. So I often either recommend pulling it out of the proposal somehow, identifying this program, we do this, this, and this with this many people, this other program, and so on. Or maybe that's also a meaningful work sample that you pull out, include a calendar or something that's like a grid that shows program X, this, program Y, this. It's always very helpful, and it's always a quick reference guide when reviewing proposals. But my real pet peeve is proposals that have theory, too much theory. There's one proposal that sticks out of my mind that came several years ago, that out of a 10-page proposal, 5 to 7 pages was all funding, why we should fund this type of organization, like the meaning behind arts and blank. I don't want to say what it is because I don't want to give the group away. And it lobbied with all this research and technical information, and I had no idea what they were doing. And they waited till the last page or two to really describe what the project was, what their organization actually did. And for me, I'm converted. I'm an arts appreciator. I'm the Arts and Humanities Program Officer. So it's my job to be on your side, and I really want to dispense this money out there in the community. So in my case, it's know your funder, know if they already like the arts, and maybe you don't need so much theory. Maybe a paragraph, maybe 2.
Yeah, that goes along with my pet peeve, which is you don't have to convince us that the arts are valuable and that they are beneficial.
Yeah.
We get that. There's no other funder that would get that more than we do. So you don't need to convince us. And I guess the other thing I would mention is we do site visits as part of our application process. We have usually 2 site visitors that come out. Please be courteous and make it as easy as possible for them to attend your performances. And when you do meet with them for an administrative visit, have the pertinent information available as well as the right personnel that can answer questions about the application. Oftentimes the reviewer will go and they'll meet with the artistic director, but that person is not able to answer any of the questions related to the organizational aspects. So you want to be sure that you have a team of people, the right people there.
I'll just add one thing. I convened a panel one time, and there was a project that proposed some collaborations and collaborators. And one of the proposed collaborators learned of the collaboration in the panel review. So, not a good situation. So again, if you think the funder just wants to hear collaborate, I mean, make sure that it is authentic.
What? Any other? We could probably go on and on that themes. I think building on that is, so obviously in that case there was maybe not the great relationship between the supposed collaborators. I think it's also important to build relationships with program officers and foundation staff, and I'm always surprised how few calls I receive, even from existing grantees, either before or after the proposal for feedback. So I'm curious to hear sort of your take on that, and if I'm the only one, which I don't think I am. So I see Michael nodding his head.
Well, I will say this. I'm with the federal government, and I'm here to help. And
He really means it.
I actually mean it. I think people are surprised that they can call us, and we will pick up the phone, and we will have the conversation. In my old job in Seattle, we had a Nordstrom, city government, we had to have a Nordstrom level of customer service. We actually held clinics where we reviewed draft applications. We can't do that at the Arts Endowment because of the volume, but we can have that conversation with applicants to walk through an application. I really encourage, it's surprising, we encourage that. Likewise, on the other side of it, we encourage applicants to call for feedback, and I've noticed that some of the most successful funders, applicants call for feedback whether they were funded or whether they weren't funded. And I think it's just it's that constant learning of what did people think, what were the questions, what came in, and that kind of constant learning, I think, really helps to maintain that focus. But I think we all, actually, for program officers, that's the best part of our job, is actually engaging with the field and practitioners to better understand and to provide that feedback. So we welcome it.
As a former program officer myself, I would say that the majority of the applicants that come into the process do not follow up for that kind of feedback. And we're looking at ways to provide it through transmitting the comments to the applicants themselves. We do offer opportunities for applicants to come in and we actually review the application and assist in that way. We offer technical assistance workshops, and many of the applicants do not take advantage of that, which is a shame. We are a government agency, and that's what we're sworn to do, is to be public servants, and I take that serious in my role, my current role as the executive director. So that's customer service is really high on the list for the arts agency in the District of Columbia. I mean, many of the folks in the room will probably attest to the fact that we're very open and that we are one of the more responsive agencies in the District of Columbia government, if not the most responsive government agency. So
it is surprising because, like my peers here, we don't get the number of calls once the proposals have been declined, and it's the worst part of my job to actually have those conversations because I feel so bad. And I want there to be a successful outcome, but unfortunately that's just not the way it works for everyone. But there are proposals that come in year after year, and there's these folks that never call for that feedback. And for equity reasons, I can't go out and reach out to all the different declined proposals and have them call, because then I would never get to anything else I needed to do. But it's up to those organizations. I do have one person, one grantee out of my portfolio of 80 that calls when they get an approved grant, and they ask for feedback. One out of 80.
I don't think I've ever had
But
that.
there's not many who call for the decline. I would say if you do get declined and it is a funder that will reciprocate and give feedback, call as soon as you get that feedback. Because I have people that call a year and a half later, and by then it's old news. But we do provide that feedback, and when people do get that feedback, the proposals are much better, much stronger in the following years.
I would add to that if you have the opportunity to attend a panel meeting where your application is being reviewed, take advantage of that. We too provide technical assistance. We're happy to talk with you at any time. Our program staff is there to assist you. We too have webinars and workshops. We're also considering something that the NEA is already doing for state partnership grants. They've set up a telephone line where you can actually listen in to the panel conversation. So we're looking at that at the State Arts Council to see if that is something that we could offer to all of you, that you can just listen in to the panel meeting so you don't have to physically be there.
Great.
One of the other, and I want to mention this, is one of the other strategies that we've instituted is to offer the opportunity for folks to be nominated as panelists. Many folks have found it very, very informative and inform their application in future years to help them understand what the panel process was about. And so we invite folks who have been declined or who would be expert panelists within the peer review panel process to be a part of our panel process, and it's been helpful.
The other thing that we have done agency-wide lately is we now have webinars in each of the discipline, and everyone has different learning styles, and for some people, swashing through all of the text is difficult, but if we can graphically explain the process, and again, we're interested in circulation, and we're definitely interested in reaching new organizations and creating that circulation. And so we've just launched that territory, but we're really trying to use technology and video conferencing to achieve the same goals.
Great. Well, I actually want to take a step backwards for a minute and talk about something that Lionel mentioned maybe 5 minutes ago, and that's return on investment. And that's one of those buzzwords I think we as funders throw around quite a bit, return on investment. And so I'm curious to hear how you explain that to grantees. What are you looking for when you say we want to know your ROI or your social return on investment? How are you advising them to calculate that, and what does that mean to you? Because I think it means different things to different people and different funders. Anyone?
Since I brought it up,
Looking at you.
And it really is it's sort of a buzzword, but I think what we're looking at are tangible outcomes and how the money that is invested in arts organizations and as arts organizations make their case, how's it really impacting the community? How is this money really being shared within neighborhoods? as a public funder, and because we are held accountable by other stakeholders, that includes the city council and the executive branch of government, we have to be able to make the case, because we are your chief advocates within the funding paradigm in the District of Columbia. And as the chief advocate, we have to be able to make that case. So it's important for us to be able to document that kind of information in order to really make the case and really to see how we can increase funding for the arts that will allow us to get to more people and to give larger grants, and to give general operating support, and to give project grants, and to give so many other things that are needed in the community.
We don't specifically address ROI in an application process. We kind of do that on the back end of things in terms of taking the data that you provide in terms of jobs and other expense and revenue categories, and then we have to put that into vocabulary that our authorizers understand, because it is something that they respond to. But as far as putting it in an application, we really, again, look to the 3 criteria that we have: artistic merit, organizational effectiveness, and service to the community.
Okay.
I have a slightly different take on that. In Seattle, state constitution forbids the gifting of public funds. We were not a granting agency. We made investment in cultural organizations to increase public access to the arts. We were focused on the public benefit. We didn't necessarily prescribe how that would happen. We put that back on the applicant. Obviously, our priorities, our interests were increasing public access to the arts. So if you could quantify the number of young people or senior citizens or disabled individuals or whatever, I mean, to the extent that you could quantify your outcomes, that was helpful, and we had a database, and we would track that, and that was part of our work. And this was not just, this is happening in cities nationwide, where arts and culture are seen as important players in community development. And so I think certainly for public funders, there is absolutely an interest in particularly in reaching audiences that are outside of the typical audience. And so it's kind of, I would say to the applicant, that it actually presents some interesting opportunities to try some new ideas. And along those lines, I would say, going back to honesty and authenticity, sometimes you may not fully hit the mark, but I think everyone at this table would give you credit for trying and for being honest about it, and more importantly, what was the lesson learned? That's something we always ask in our evaluation. If you didn't achieve your outcomes, if you didn't achieve your goals, what did you learn as a result? And hopefully maybe that's something that your peers could learn from, certainly as an organization that you could learn from. So I think that language of investment is, it's certainly at Grantmakers in the Arts, it's a conversation in the local arts agencies around the nation. That's an important part of the conversation. It goes back to the accountability.
Okay.
And I should say, as the token private funder, we don't have this in our vocabulary. And I wonder if it's because it does impact maybe the public sector more so. And we don't have to constantly justify our grant-making budget, because it is what it is and how we've endowed our money. But I should say that we are looking at how you are impacting the local community, how you're measuring your success, and your overall plan of action to do that. And we look at the interim and final reports if a grant is made. So we try to keep things as simple as possible, because we realize there are a lot of stipulations for a lot of different organizations out there. So you're doing your best to meet everyone's guidelines. But I think for us is, did you achieve your mission? Did you achieve what you said you were going to in the given year? Because it's general support, it's a little bit broader in some ways, and it's a little bit harder to evaluate in my eye. But I'm looking to see, did you do the activities that you said you were going to do? Maybe that's a simplified view of it, but that's what we do.
Great. And I just wanted to share for folks that are sitting there thinking, okay, so how do I calculate this? It sounds like I might have to figure it out for myself, and different funders look at this thing differently. There is a really good website. It's the sroinetwork.org, and they have some really helpful tools for how to approach and ask the questions when you're thinking about calculating social return on investment. And so that might not just be the dollar impact, but the community impact, which I'm hearing from a lot of our panelists today is very important. So hopefully you can send that out as well. So I think we've covered a lot of the buzzwords we talked about. I sort of had this section of nuts and bolts, and we've certainly heard some of our pet peeves. So other than what we don't want in an application, and I think we've answered this, but well, actually, I'm going to reframe this a little bit differently. If you're looking at, and I'm not sure where everyone stands in this kind of funding, there's sort of project funding and operational support funding. What kinds of things are you looking for in those different kinds of proposals? Because I think from the organizations applying, it's kind of hard to know, do we sort of write about everything we're doing and make it confusing, or do we really focus? And what makes the most sense for those two types of proposals if you accept both? So.
Well, for CAFRITS, with most of our funding is general support, so that's usually where people gravitate because it's the hardest kind of support to get usually. We're looking at all different aspects of your organization, and the proposal takes you through that. If you haven't seen the application, it talks about your board governance, your financing, your fundraising, and then your current programs. For us, the proposals that rise to the top are really those that demonstrate their depth and breadth in the community. And when I evaluate proposals, I'm looking for what you're doing that's beyond the stage, what's beyond the gallery space. How are you engaging people in unique ways? What is the community that you say that you're working in, and are you actually working with those folks, whoever they may be? We don't dictate what that engagement needs to be. It could be school children, it could be older adults, it could be post-show discussions, the list can go on, but we're really looking to see if there's a deeper engagement than just a performance. And for a lot of groups, that's hard to demonstrate because they just do performances or just have exhibitions. But we're really looking to see how do you create that access, and that you're just not there, if you build it, they will come type of mentality. And that's what really helps a proposal rise to the top. We're also looking at how you're innovative and how you might address the local economy. In DC, we adopted the Cultural Data Project, which is a tool that Maryland's had for several years. And I feel that this kind of branches the past question and this question, but I feel that the Cultural Data Project will help us make a better case and really provide the numbers that might not be there in an organization to really demonstrate that depth and breadth. Number of people you're reaching, but also what's the story behind that number.
Okay. Anyone else?
I learned to appreciate the Cultural Data Project when I was in Prince George's County as a fundee of the Maryland State Arts Council. So I do understand the significance and the importance. And the importance. I'm saying that it's a very good tool to demonstrate and to help organizations really plan for the future. The DC Arts Commission, we provide both operational, general operating support as well as project support. We basically fund, the criteria is in 3 different areas. Artistic merit is always the highest consideration, community impact, and financial manageability. And those are the 3 that are very important. So it's important for organizations to really demonstrate in those 3 areas. With regards to general operating support, we're looking for honesty and authenticity for organizations to really be true to their mission, to demonstrate to the panel their impact and talk about and tell the story of their organizations about what they're providing, what kind of services they're providing, what kind of planning process are they incorporating within the organization. For projects, I think it's much more simpler. I think depending on what the project is and how collaborative the project is, we're judging based on how the story is told with regards to the audiences and how you're encouraging people to be a part of your program and how you're sharing your work to the community. One of the things I'd like to say is that we find it to be very important for us to also be accountable to the arts community, and we take an internal assessment. So part of that whole process of understanding some of the projects that go on, we want to also be mindful that we have a responsibility to be accountable to the community as well as a public funder.
At the Arts Council, at the state level, we primarily do general operating support, and we provide support for more than 250 organizations. And we also provide block grants to the 24 designated local arts councils so that they can do re-granting. And the three criteria that we look for they're all equal in weight, and that's artistic merit, organizational effectiveness, and that has to do, of course, with your financial stability, also your board relationships and things of that nature, and then of course service to the community. So we're not so much looking, if an organization does performances, that's fine with us. We're not looking, unless you tell us that you're trying to go beyond the walls, which we would expect you would be if you want to be organizationally effective, then we take you at your word in terms of what you're trying to achieve. And then we base a rating on that.
The National Endowment for the Arts does not give operational support, but I've been on that side of it, and again looking at organizational stability, and I would say that a lot of people thought that meant growth, that you had to demonstrate a trajectory, and our view on that was really more of stability, that we didn't necessarily measure success in terms of, you know, bigger and better. It was again going back on quality. But now in project support in our portfolio, the language that has been added around innovation is really highlights projects that can prove to be transformative with the potential for meaningful change, whether development or enhancement of new art forms or new approaches or new ways of engaging the public, projects that are distinctive, those that offer fresh insights, and new value for the field. And I think that's, especially from a national perspective, regional projects of regional significance, or something that will be of benefit to other organizations, something where they can learn, and the ability for those ideas and those projects to be shared and emulated in the field. And I think as a national funder, I mean, that's kind of the bar that we're raising for projects, because we're very proud of the portfolio, and in fact we're actually investing additional resources into evaluation of projects that hit that criteria, so that we can better understand. That's the other part of the equation, is that we learn from you, and more in-depth evaluation hopefully will inform us for future decisions on how we continue to tweak and refine our programs, and we'll certainly continue on that path. And as been mentioned, I mean, part of our service, we're not just an ATM, but we're also have invested significantly in communications as well. A national dialogue around creative placemaking, which I haven't really mentioned, but that's another agency priority that is based in community. So through blogs, through projects, through evaluation, through storytelling, where we're inviting members of the community. What is it like to be an artist? What is it like to do this work? And really looking at that wide range. I mean, I think that is a role for a funding agency that is 10 years ago we weren't doing that kind of that kind of work. Also, really, really important. Great.
And before I know that our audience probably is anxious to ask questions of the panel, so I'll ask one last question before we move on. And I heard in these last remarks just some comments about organizational effectiveness, stability of the organizations you're funding. So obviously, as funders, we look at things like the board's capacity, the development director's capacity, the diversification of fundings, all of these things that can provide that financial stability as well as just that governance stability. And oftentimes that's where we see the red flags or the challenges. And I think a lot of us read the recent report about this revolving door of development directors nationally it's been a real challenge. So do any of you provide any capacity building support to organizations that you fund? And if you don't directly, do you use other organizations or guide them to organizations like Taproot for that kind of support? So I see Lionel's nodding.
One of the programs I'm very proud of is what we call the Upstart program. It's a program I had the honor of starting some years ago when I was with the commission doing my first tour. And it provides capacity building specifically for organizations. It's one of the few programs where people and applicants get to actually tell us about their weaknesses and really highlight their weaknesses as an opportunity for them to begin to strengthen and to begin to build a plan to develop it. We offer in that program an opportunity to do a full assessment by consultants that we pay for. They go in and do an extensive, and we have to get real buy-in from the organization, from the leadership on. They have to be a part of this process throughout. It's a very intensive process, and what has happened is that we've seen some successes, and we've also seen some people who have not really done well because they have not been invested. But we've seen some success with the program because there are organizations that are beginning to really take off and sustain themselves and build long-range plans that are really going to keep their organization strong for a very long time. We're looking at also folks who, within this process, succession planning, which a lot of organizations don't do. They are founder-driven, and when the founder dies, the organization dies. I've seen that too many times in the District of Columbia. And what I always am preaching and always am advocating for are large and strong organizations, small organizations, even emerging organizations, to begin a succession plan for their organizations in order to protect the legacy of the organization itself.
Great.
We provide, sometimes the organizations will come to us and say, we want to come for general support, we don't want to jeopardize that, but we do need some money for a strategic plan or for whatever it might be. And we have split the grant in that way so that it'd be X amount for Gen Op, X amount for planning. We just ask that there's a plan in action, that you talk to a consultant, that you have some idea of what the expenses will be so you have a budget for that project. And essentially it's a project budget and a general support request all in one. So that is an option.
Okay, Theresa.
We primarily do capacity building by having a strategic alliance with another partner. So we work, for instance, with Maryland Citizens for the Arts and do capacity building workshop. For instance, we sponsored that back in the fall. We've also worked with the Greater Baltimore Cultural Alliance and partnered on an artist program about health insurance, Obamacare, and what it would mean for artists. And young audiences for teaching artist training and things like that. So we are able to extend our work through partnerships.
And we fund technical services to art service organizations, usually both national as well as local and regional. And in my portfolio, local arts agencies, entities like Susan Shop, Creative Moco, we are funding a capacity building project. Projects that serve either the community of artists in a city or a wide range of organizations, and that could be marketing, it could be, in the case of individual artists, professional development. We've sometimes partnered with arts and business councils or volunteer lawyers for the arts around copyright issues and that sort of thing. And sometimes it's project-based, like a unified marketing or cultural tourism, which is a hat I wore many years ago, but something that a lot of communities are using as an organizing principle in order to expand the marketing capacity of organizations.
Okay.
Stay informed with news you can use only with the Montgomery Channel on location.
I'm in downtown Silver Spring for the Arts and Economics Summit, where the hot topic is the financial impact of the arts on Montgomery County. Dozens of representatives from local nonprofits gathered with local county and state officials at the headquarters of United Therapeutics for the summit. There they learned that the nonprofit arts and cultural industry generate $151 million in annual economic activity in Montgomery County. The headline of the summit: The arts mean business.
The arts and humanities are an economic driver, and that we are an important sector that's driving the economy, bringing $151 million in new revenue to the county, employing over 3,000 employees. I mean, that's huge.
It is very important that we not only highlight arts for art's sake, but we also highlight arts as a tool of job creation, growing the tax base and supporting our community.
Montgomery County has 3 of the state's 19 designated arts and entertainment districts and some 450 arts and humanities groups.
The county's 3 arts and entertainment districts are located in Bethesda, Silver Spring, and Wheaton, and officials say the districts are helping spur redevelopment.
Bethesda just won the Outstanding Award this year, Outstanding Achievement Award. And they won that because they successfully attracted 17 new businesses and 15 retailers to that area. Now, that's a place that's growing. That's a place I want to visit.
County Council member Valerie Irvin said she supports the idea of bringing artists together with businesses to build more vibrant communities.
But we all have the same sort of common ground in terms of building a more vibrant community. And so that's what this conversation was about, and I thought it was excellent, and I hope to see more of this.
For MyMC Media, I'm Sonia Burke reporting.
Have you heard the news? Montgomery Community Media has a brand new website at mymcmedia.org. Now it's easier than ever to stream and watch all your favorite local shows. Keep up to date with county voices and events. Sign up for TV production and social media classes. All this and much more. See what's new at mymcmedia.org. Don't just watch media, make it happen.
I would say I never let it dominate the proposal. And in the case I gave, it was like 70% theory, 30% programs of what was actually happening at this organization. So you want the reader to leave the proposal knowing what you're doing and why it's important. So certainly include what you feel is pertinent to the issues. I just say don't go overboard. I don't think you, I mean, I think it's just a tight balancing act you have to be careful of, and you just want to be as clear as possible about your mission and your programs at the core of the proposal. You only get so many pages, usually. I think our application was 8 to 10 pages at the time, and that's valuable space to talk about board, fundraising, staff needs, programs. I mean, the list goes on. So you want to use that as best as possible to really sell your product.
I would just add, from an agency that also has an interest in arts and science and arts and healing, and actually was engaged in a project, Walter Reed, my colleague Beth Vanview is here, doing some work with the Department of Defense. I would assume that people in our field understand the connection between arts and healing. So again, I think just focusing on the project, what is it that you want to do with the artists? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think I think everyone understands that's not only important but also valuable.
And I think that's a perfect example where it makes sense to call and talk to a program officer or someone beforehand. Say, how familiar are your trustees, or will your review panel be with this kind of theory, and how much should we include? And is it okay if I send attachments or reference websites? It never hurts, I think, in those kinds of situations to get a little guidance up front.
Or in our case, you can send a draft prior to submitting it, and we'll make comment with regards to your application. And I echo the sentiments of my colleagues about explaining the process, because that's really what we're more interested in, is understanding the process for selection, inclusion, and how the project will be executed.
I think the best way to explain your artistic vision and your personnel and who's the artist involved, you have an opportunity to provide their backgrounds, their bios, certainly. You can attach supplemental materials to that effect. I think that you use every avenue you can to tell that story. But there's no, again, it's a balancing act. But you can expect that the funders want to give the best review to your application, to give it their best work as well. So they'll make sure that they have experts on the other side to make sure that they're reviewing this and that it has an appropriate review.
I think in our case, in Washington, D.C., that is something that we're really grappling with. And I've talked to my colleagues around the jurisdictions. Susan and I have conversations about how we can partner together. But unfortunately, we haven't cracked that nut yet. And when we get to the stakeholders, the funding is all about how is it serving your jurisdiction. And I think for us, it's really a challenge. The regionalism, I think, is the next new normal for us, and to look at how we can all work together as a region. One case is that we've been able to develop the energy around economic development strategies, and we've done an economic impact study as a region with the 6 regions that make up the Washington, D.C. regional area that include Montgomery County, Prince George's County, Washington, Fairfax, Arlington, and Alexandria. And we've been able to crack that nut and get that going. But we still are having discussions about how we can all work together and really expand the funding across jurisdictions and how we can make that happen.
We struggle with that as well, and we have tried on several program fronts to try and work with other states to export our artists and also be willing to have their artists come over into Maryland and support them through our individual presenters. So we try to work within the boundary system to the best we can, but I don't see anything in the near future that would allow us to fund organizations based in Maryland, or excuse me, outside of Maryland. That's sort of our organizing principle.
That's a very interesting question. I don't think that there's any formula per se, but in our case, I think what the panelists are looking for is that the funding is going to support the arts and that it's not administratively heavy, and you can use that as the parameter to judge. The other part of it, what was the second part of your question?
Is there a certain amount?
Board contributions?
Yeah.
And there isn't. There really isn't. What we'd like to see are board members that are invested in the organization in some way, financially, and that's up to the organization to determine. So we don't set the parameters for that.
I think the important thing is that you show that your board, doesn't matter the dollar amount, but that if you have 100% of your board members contributing something, that's the most important message that you can send.
And I'd say from our perspective, we require a minimum one-to-one match. In reality is most projects exceed that, but at minimum. And certainly staff salaries and overhead can be considered part of the in-kind match. Generally, I would say that most reviewers favor a strong cash match. So I think, no, we don't have a formula, but I think, again, these are peers and reasonable.
So you're saying the donor amount, total donor amount should be equal to the request?
we require that there has to be a match, and that could be a combination of in-kind, minimum one-to-one, in-kind, and a variety of sources. And in-kind can be.
But I think it's important that you have a diverse mix also, that you have revenues from many different sources, or as many sources as possible, corporate, individual, etc.
Honestly.
Well, and also to show who's pending. I mean, when I ask for that information, as I have from you, is what is your pending and received contributed income list? So just showing that you do have proposals out there, you are trying to beat the odds and reach out to folks, I think is really important. I've also had conversations with different organizations that have said, well, we've never gone back to our lapsed donors that have just stopped giving after 4 years. So, we're going to start thinking about that. I was like, yeah, you should. It is time to do that. So I'm looking for proactive solutions that, rather than, oh, the funding's hard, so we're just not asking people. I'm always surprised when I rattle off sort of my usual suspect list of funders that people are like, oh, I've never heard of them, or we've never gone back to them after being declined 3 years ago. Well, you got to keep on trying. Yeah.
And I say honestly, there's a company, and I ditto the comments of Michael, a budget narrative that is supporting the budget itself. So it's an opportunity for you to begin to explain some of those peculiarities with regards to your budget and the diversity of your funding structure and so forth. So that in itself provides you the narrative opportunity to explain what your plan is and how you're moving forward.
For me, it's just about scheduling a meeting before the deadline, usually a month and a half beforehand, phone call or in person, and just talking about the ideas you have. I won't be involved in the creation of the proposal. I won't read drafts, but I can provide any feedback to questions that you may have, and that's what we're happy to do. We don't have the capacity to take on much more than that.
And our process begins with an intent to apply, which we hope most organizations will take advantage of, and that's, again, 4 to 6 weeks before the deadline, so that we can make sure that we reach out to you and set up an appointment either for you to come in and talk to us in Baltimore, or oftentimes we'll be able to go out into the field and do multiple visits at the same time.
We have a unique situation. We have a portal called grants.gov, which is the federal portal for all funding applications. We strongly encourage everyone to register far, far in advance and not wait. Our idea of last minute is 10 days before the application. So I think the earlier you have that conversation, the better. The week before the deadline, it's actually kind of heartbreaking to be on the phone with someone who's trying to get through grants.gov, waiting till the last minute, and particularly someone with a really great idea and can't get through. So now would be a good time to have that conversation. Earlier the better.
Well, we're looking at some of the things that the NEA has already implemented, multiple year funding, because we have recognized that in some cases it's a disservice to provide funding 1 year and then next year the person is not funded. So it's important. I mean, I think that's a trend that we're moving towards long-term, to help build long-term sustainability. How do you do that? You do it multiple years at a time. And so, we don't really, we think that that's one of the trends that we're looking at, and we're trying to work out a mechanism to make that happen within our funding restrictions, because we're on an annual appropriation, and it makes it really hard for us to do, to make those kind of commitments.
We don't look at organizations small, medium, large, giant necessarily. I mean, everyone's on an even playing field. in most cases. We're looking at the content of what you're doing, the impact, on and on. It has been hard over the past several years to take on new projects, and when I say new, they're new to KFRITS, new that we've never funded before. Usually about 10% of our giving is to those programs each year. That number has decreased in the most recent past, but I've been slowly been able to take on some more new projects in my docket over the past year and a half, which is very encouraging. Because there were several years where I had nothing new and it was all past grantees, which is all well and good. We pride ourselves on continuing those relationships, but you want to try to create that, cultivate that artistic environment of the city. So I think it's just going to continue to be difficult, and the competition is going to be there, but I think it's getting back to what we've been saying on the panel about showing how you're relevant, showing how you engage, and really are part of the artistic fabric of the region. And there are a lot of groups that are declined 1, 2, 5, 7 years in a row, but there might just be that sweet spot where they're able to get in the door. And I just think it's continuing those conversations with the program officer, the person at the foundation, and see, keep inviting them out to things, whether they can come or not. I mean, their dockets are very busy, but keep that communication going. I think that's really important so that they're aware of everything that each of these groups are doing.
I think that's a really, really great question. And from a national perspective, one of the trend lines that I'm seeing nationwide in communities, and we certainly did this in Seattle. As Michael mentioned, we dissolved categories because what we found is we had basically first, second, and third class citizenship, which was the criticism that we got by creating these categories. And really what we were trying to communicate, and which I think we did successfully, is that all the arts ecosystem is valuable to our community. And I think cities across the country, if you look at the conversations that local arts agencies are having with changing demographics, it's incumbent upon agencies to really reflect their communities. And that means figuring out ways to encompass the full range of not just arts, but cultural vibrancy in communities. And I think, if anything, the more successful local arts agencies and communities and that I'm seeing are really embracing that with the support of their communities, because the elected officials, and again, primarily from a public funding, but also those entities that also rely on private funding, as has been mentioned as well, it's that rootedness in community. So I think, if anything, if there's a trend line, it's really an increased value and appreciation for community-based arts organizations. And I mean, artists have been figuring this out for years, and either doing it above or below the radar. But I think that's kind of exciting. It's scary to some people, because it is definitely changing community dynamics. But ultimately, I think it sends really a strong and a positive message to the people who invest in community that it's a much bigger picture. And I think, particularly going back to data, which is why data is so important, because data can help make the case why that increased investment is needed and how it pays off. And it just reaches so many goals. It reaches new people, new audiences. And I think it's a great question. I really appreciate it, and I think that is definitely the trending. And it goes by different names. Neighborhood and community arts in some communities, which, again, I think kind of reflects what you're talking about. Thank you.
I think I would just add that we too believe that there is a level playing field. Doesn't matter if you're small, medium, or large. That there's value along that continuum wherever you see not only this way but this way as well. And I think that what we're looking at the state is how can we enhance the capacity of our local arts councils to address the needs of these more grassroots pop-up type of situations, because we're not agile, we don't move very quickly. But if there's some way that we could help our local arts councils become more nimble and provide perhaps some funding for that specific purpose, that's where I see us heading in the future.
Yeah, we didn't, as a matter of fact, we didn't, in our what do we call it? We called it Smart Ventures. We didn't even require nonprofit status. Yeah. We were interested in supporting community activity and quality work, and that was our #1 goal, was supporting vibrancy in the community. So I think there are a lot of ways that communities are figuring it out, and that's part of the national conversation with local arts agencies, and Susan is part of those conversations. And it's kind of exciting, and there's some cities that I think are really on the vanguard and on the leading edge of doing that work.
Well, I just thank you all today, and just real quick before we close, is there any advice or words of wisdom or hopefully inspiration behind the new normal to make folks feel good about this buzzword and not think of it as a bad thing before we close?
I have 2 pearls of wisdom. You don't ask, you don't get, and no isn't no until it's yes.
I would just say that one thing we haven't talked about here is really the way that we communicate the messaging, and how we really need to tell our stories more visually. So in that vein, I would share with you that I have some handouts here. You talk about ROI. This is our economic impact of the arts in Maryland, a new type of messaging for us. And then our annual report also. So all of those reports that you fill out for us, they do result in data that we then communicate visually and through other infographics to get that message across about ROI.
I think advocate is really important. We didn't talk about advocacy and how important to have that kind of responsibility, and we empower you with that responsibility to tell your stories to the stakeholders so that they understand the importance of the arts. Because it's really self-serving when we go to their offices and we say we need more money for the arts, and then we look behind, there's no one behind us. So it's important to have that army behind us.
The pressure, the last question. 2 things. If you know one foundation, you know one foundation. Everyone is different, so I encourage you to dig a little deeper and see what you can find. If you don't know the Foundation Center, I encourage you to become familiar. Foundationcenter.org, and there's a site here right downtown at 16th and K. And then I would just say that you are your best advocates. Don't be afraid to approach foundation executives. All they can say is, we don't have time to talk to you. But I think you will be surprised that, I think everyone on this panel is open to conversations before, after, during, and there are more out there. So I would just encourage you to keep those lines of communication open and make everyone aware of what you're doing, and just tell your story.
And I would just add for myself too, I think it's important to get to know the funder. I can't tell you how many times I meet folks at events or outings, and the first question out of their mouth is, how do I apply for funding, without knowing anything about the foundation that I work for. So I think it's really important to build that relationship, get to know the program officers, the people working behind the scenes at the foundations you're approaching or the organizations you're approaching. Build that relationship first so that you come armed with information and really understand what they're looking for, and it'll save them time and you time as well. So, with that.
Well.
Have you heard the news? Montgomery Community Media has a brand new website. See what's new at mymcmedia.org. Don't just watch media, make it happen.
There's a lot of love in Montgomery County for the arts and humanities. And tonight, in this room, we'll celebrate some of the people making a big difference on the local arts scene.
The 8 honorees honored tonight have made remarkable contributions to advance the arts and humanities in Montgomery County. They truly deserve our praise and admiration.
It was a packed crowd for the award ceremony, which included live performances and grantee recognition. The first award of the night went to Gaithersburg City Council member Judd Ashman for launching the Gaithersburg Book Festival.
I'm a community guy, I'm a book guy, and it's been an amazing experience to be able to bring the two together and to be honored by my community after these 4 years. It feels like it's come full circle. It's just beautiful.
The president of the Silver Spring Town Center, Alan Bozer, received the volunteer award.
While I receive this award tonight, I receive it on behalf of the hundreds, no, thousands of volunteers who every day go out and make Montgomery County a better place to live and play.
Other award winners included Robert Doman for his work at the Olney Theater, Alan Stevens of the Puppet Company, and Claire Squadron of Project Youth Outreach, who received the Education Award.
I do work inside correctional facilities, and it's not connected to schools particularly, but it's great to know that the county recognizes the value of working with all people.
Jennifer Bazell of Strathmore was honored with the Emerging Leader Award, while the final two awards of the evening celebrated a lifetime of excellence in the arts and humanities field.
My hope is that I've given the people of this county, our great county, enrichment, education, and entertainment.
Because what we really do for a living, all of us in this room, is we create goosebump moments.
For MyMC Media, I'm Sonia Burke reporting.
MyMCmedia.org has the spotlight on Montgomery County. Get going with MyMCmedia.org for constantly updated information like neighborhood events, newsmakers, hot topics, arts and entertainment, and much more. It's the one spot for everything Montgomery. Let the MyMC Media Spotlight shine on your day. And while you're here, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and find out what people are talking about right now. MyMCmedia.org, spotlighting your day every day.
Fabulous and enlightening. I know that even though I've spent at least 30 years in this field as what I call myself a cultural warrior, that every day I learn something new from my colleagues. So I want to thank Amanda Farnham, Michael Bigley, Lionel Thomas, Theresa Colvin, and Michael Chlorin for coming today and sharing your wisdom and your insights about what is the new normal. And thank you all for being here and for your thoughtful questions, and thank you again for taking the time to come and speak with us today. Thank you.